Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gorlak and I am a mediocre gamer. As always, the first step is admitting it, and now we're on our way to recovery. Today we're going to take a look at a little game called World of Tanks. Maybe some of you have heard of it. World of Tanks is a 3D action game based around, you guessed it, tanks. What could be more badass, right? Tanks come in 10 tiers and at the moment are from 9 different countries, but new countries and tanks are being added all the time. There are also 5 different kinds of tanks. This one here is a light tank. Light tanks are very speedy, as you'll see in a minute when I enter the game. As a light tank, you'll primarily be playing as a scout. Now, don't get confused when you start this game if you don't already play, because the first tank that you're going to get is going to be a light tank. And for the first 3 or 4 tiers, as you level up, you're going to continue to play light tanks. It's just the way that early game works. Based on the tank type you're playing is how you want to outfit your tank. For example, the Chaffee, a tier 5 light tank, I'm primarily going to be scouting, so the biggest things I'm going to need are my tracks, my advanced engine, and my radio, so that I can communicate with other players. Whereas with medium tanks, heavy tanks, and tank destroyers, after you get your tracks, you're most likely going to go for an upgraded gun, because you are the primary damage dealers in any particular game. Now, while every tank is different and there's no hard and set rule saying that light tanks can't be a top damage dealer, most of the time you're going to be primarily scouting. You're the fastest tanks on the field, and you have the best view distance other than maybe the tank destroyer, depending on which tank you have. As you can see with this light tank right here, I'm doing upwards of 50 miles an hour going up a hill, which is pretty incredible speed for a tank. So what I'm going to try and show you here is how you would kind of use the environment to your benefit so that you can spot and stay out of range of other tanks. The key here is to spot them without taking damage yourself. Your armor is going to be a lot weaker than any of the other tanks on the field because you're a light tank. So what I've done here is I've spotted the enemy tanks that have been pushing up the hill. There are about 5 tanks in front of me at the moment. So after I've spotted them, I'm going to back off. I want to keep their positions known to my allies, but I don't want to be taking damage. Next is our medium tank. These are all-purpose tanks. You have decent speed, decent armor, and you can pack a punch. You'll notice as my primary strategy in a lot of these maps is going to be getting to high ground. When you're up high, you can spot most of the field. This gives you the advantage of being able to see your enemy without them being able to necessarily see you back. It's also very important to use the terrain around you and the foliage. The foliage can be an overlooked item on the field of battle, however it hides you from the enemy and increases your overall camouflage rating. So coming up ahead here, you're going to see that, unlike the light tank, the medium tank is significantly slower when going up a hill. That's because you're significantly heavier. You'll also notice that based on the position of your tank on the hill, you may or may not be able to shoot at enemies because of the depression of your gun. Once you go into first-person mode, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to shoot it anywhere possible. Your tank still has to follow the physics mechanics. This, however, can be beneficial if you do something that is called hauling down. Basically, you want to be on an incline so that you're facing your hull down so that you're able to bounce more shots, because the underplate of your tank is what's the weakest. Now you'll see here I didn't take time to line up the first shot and missed completely. The second shot, however, bounced. At this distance, it's difficult to find the weak spots on the other tank, however, it can be done if you are aiming carefully. You'll notice that even though I can see the enemy here, he isn't outlined until he starts peeking over the ridge. I can see where he is in relation to me, but he has cover. Now for the purposes of this video, I'm going to push up and see if I can find an enemy that's a little bit closer. You'll notice that I'm able to spot the Carnivoron coming up here. Now, as for weak spots on him, the side of his turret where I hit is definitely one of them. And as he's going to have a stronger gun because he's a heavy tank, I back off for the moment. But as I SOS to alert my team that he's here, we're going to have a numbers advantage. This is very important with any game that you play, but especially in World of Tanks. If you have a numbers advantage, you're able to push better. Whilst remaining in cover, I aim for the weak spot, right through the tracks into his engine. Learning the weak spot for every tank is absolutely key to your success in the World of Tanks. As you go tier by tier, you're going to start to recognize tanks that are in the battle. If you don't have a friend that actually has a tank of this particular brand, so that you can look at and find the individual weaknesses, there are some that are pretty basic throughout. I'll show you those at the end of the video. Now, as far as heavy tanks go, I'm going to do something that is not necessarily something that I would recommend you do, and I'm going to storm into the middle of town here because I want to show you just how resilient heavy tanks can be. I'm going to take an incredible amount of abuse here just for the purpose of this video. You'll notice that I end up in a 2-on-1, and I'm able to hold my own for a considerable amount of time. I'm able to bounce the first shot coming in, and then I notice that he's going to continue to push me because he's going to have support. The best move for me at the moment is to retreat into the town and hope that one of my teammates is going to come to help me. Because it's such a poor spot on this particular map, it's unlikely that that help is going to come. So you'll notice I see him coming, so I'm going to want to turn my butt away from him as quickly as possible. Even though I give up my side, it is much better to give up my side than it is a rear engine shot. If shot in the engine, it's likely that it could be knocked out, which would leave me completely motionless and unable to really respond and attack. Now that his teammate has joined the battle and it's a 2-on-1, I have to pick my targets carefully. Unfortunately for me, I missed the turret shot that I'm attempting because I want to hit where his captain's latch is. I try aiming in and hitting the spot just under the turret, as this can be a weak spot for most tanks as well. The IS-3 is incredibly armored, especially from the front, so at this point, unfortunately, I am defeated, but you notice how many hits I was able to take. The last kind of tank that I want to highlight is the SPG. These are basically mortars of the game. Instead of being a sniper like a tank destroyer, and instead of being a city brawler kind of like the heavy tanks, you are completely an assassin in the shadows as an SPG. SPGs are also referred to as artillery if you get confused as to the naming of any individual tank. There's two different ways to aim in as an SPG. The basic overhead as I'm doing now, and there's also a view that I'm going to show you in a little bit where you actually have a much better way to look at individual tanks and take shots based on their weak points. Now, in order to properly show you the weak points in every tank, I would have to make a video that's well over an hour, and that's just not something that someone like you would want to sit through. So I'm kind of highlighting each individual playstyle so that you can kind of get an idea of how things should go, and then I'll go over some more in-depth tips as the video progresses. But just to get an idea of all the different tanks that we have, we're going to go with this. One tip as an artillery for sure is after every individual shot, you absolutely should move, especially if you're in a multi-artillery game. Here's the other view that I was showing you. He's a tank destroyer, so his top armor is going to be weak. I'm going to try and put a shot right on top of him, and while I don't actually hit, the splash damage is enough to damage him just because of the weakness of his armor. Now this shot against a heavy tank is something that's going to be a little more difficult to hit, but at the same time, because of the way they're grouped, I'm able to splash damage. Once you get to the top tiers, anything over 6, I would say, between 6 and 10, the most important thing you could possibly know is the weak points on the other tanks and the maps. You want to put yourself in the most beneficial position to actually do damage to the other tank and to survive any potential attacks. So while this particular MGA tips video isn't necessarily as in-depth as, say, a Counter-Strike or an Overwatch, where it's more geared to specific actions that a player can take to improve their overall gameplay, knowledge of the map, using your environment, putting yourself in beneficial positions where you'll take less damage, and be able to spot and do more damage to other tanks is the be-all and end-all for this particular game. You need to know your weak spots, and you need to be in good positions. And even though you'll see here, I'm in a good position, I wait for the perfect shot and I take it, even an artillery round can bounce. T-95s have incredible amount of armor, and while very, very slow, they're a powerhouse in the field. I am going to get a successful hit here, and you'll notice that because of the hill, I'm actually leading him a little bit. Because as he comes up the hill, he's going to drive right into my bullet anyway, so I want to make sure that I'm aiming further down the hill to make sure my round gets to where I want it to be so he'll drive into it. Now we're in the unfortunate position where it's just me and one other tank against the T-95, and while he can be within one hit for me, the other guy is unlikely to penetrate him at all. So now that he's approaching my partner, who is actually very, very weak at the moment anyway from earlier tank battles, I'm going to have to make sure I take the perfect shot. Now with the buildings here, you want to make sure that you're lining up a shot that's going to be successful depending on the percentages. So I want to take the highest percentage shot I have available to me, which is right here. And I do hit him, but unfortunately RNG roll was low, and he's able to take out my partner. Now I still do have one chance to take this guy out. You'll notice that, like I said, you keep moving after every shot. That's what I did. My last best chance to kill this guy is with what's called a shotgun. SPGs are not meant to take and do damage with a full frontal shot like this. They're meant to do it from distance, which is why I missed, but sometimes it can be successful if you have somebody rushing at you. Now, as I said, I want to point out some weak points just to give you a generalization of any weak points for the game. You'll notice that my tank destroyer here has several portholes in the front. Pretty much anywhere you see a latch, a viewfinder, or a flat side of the tank is a good spot for you to try and aim. With the SPG, you can knock out the gun just by shooting this side plate here. I'm going to show you the heavy tank because it's a little better to kind of show you what I mean when I say viewfinders. You see these three holes here? They're little slits where your actual person would be looking out to get a view of the field. Those are easy penetrations for anyone who hits it, as is the underplate. The best part to hit any tank, however, for the most part, is the side tracks or the engine. If you can get an engine shot, you are absolutely golden. Also, like I highlighted earlier, the space under the turret where the turret meets the tank, you want to aim there, or the little captain's entrance on the top of the tank will be easily penetrable. As always, thank you everyone so much for watching my videos. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend a little bit of it with me. As always, be good to each other, and let's game.